Welcome to Learn Linux Networks. Today we're going to install an OS on our physical server. We're going to install Ubuntu server. The version we will be installing is 20.04.4. We will be setting up a software RAID, and we'll talk a bit about a backup versus redundancy. So a backup is to recover files if they become corrupted, or let's say you deleted some files by mistake. You could go to your backup and you could retrieve those files from a previous point in time. And that is not what redundancy is in setting up a software RAID. That is for device failures. So in this server, we will have two hard drives that are mirrored through a software RAID. And so if you accidentally delete a file, it's going to delete it from both drives. The purpose of the redundancy is so that if you have a drive failure, all you have to do is unplug it, reboot your machine, and the backup mirrored drive is going to be exactly the same as the drive that failed. You will use the USB that we created in our previous video with the Ubuntu 20.04.4 plugged into your USB port. Fire up your server, and you may have to go into your BIOS to set it to boot from the USB rather than boot from the hard drive. And once you boot from the USB, you will get this screen. Here, I select English for me. Use whatever language you need. I just continue here without updating the installer. I say done here. I keep those layouts. Here you can see if your network connection is working. You'll get the IP address that shows up here. If it doesn't show up, then you might want to boot from a live USB, of Ubuntu desktop, so you can, troubleshoot and figure out why your network connection is not working. But as long as you get an IP address like we did here, we're good to go. We do need that network connection for updates. Here, we don't want to use the entire disk. We want to go down to a custom storage layout because we are setting up a software RAID. And at this screen here, this is a little confusing. It shows that I have two 20 gig hard drives, and if you watch the video where we built the server, that's not the case. So I'm doing this in a VM so I can get better screen recording. So in order to do that, I can't duplicate the size of disk I have in the physical server, so I'm using 220. So at the first device, you'll want to create, you'll want to go to the free space on the first device and select it as a boot device. And then you'll want to do the same thing on the second drive. It'll say add as another boot device. You'll want to do that, and that'll create two 1 meg partitions that is for grub. Then you want to go back to the first drive. And the key here is each drive needs to have the same partition, same size, and you don't want to format them. So the first one here, we're going to create a partition of 1 gig, and that is going to be for the boot partition. We'll just put in the 1G. We'll change the format to do not format. And then we'll click create. Now we'll want to go down and do that same thing to the second drive. Add GPT partition, 1 gig, leave unformatted, and then say create. We'll go back to the first drive, to the free space. We'll create another partition, and this partition here will be based on your RAM size. If you have 32 gigs of RAM, then you want to do a 32 gig swap partition, which is what this will end up being. In this case here, again, I'm on a VM. I'm just going to do an 8 gig just to show, and leave unformatted and create that. You then need to go to the second drive and do the same thing so that it mirrors the first. Add a GPT partition, 8 gig, or whatever you want for a swap partition. Leave unformatted and create. And then the last partition is going to be the space that we're going to use for the system. So we leave the size blank, which will use everything that's left, and leave unformatted, and then click create. Now we need to make that same partition on disk 2. Now we'll use the create software RAID to tie each of those partitions together. We need to tie together partition 2 from each, partition 3 from each, and partition 4 from each. We'll go down to software RAID. We'll select partition 2 from the first drive and partition 2 from the second drive, and then click create. We'll go back to create software RAID. We'll select partition 3 from the first drive, partition 3 from the second drive, and create. Go back to create software RAID, and we'll select partition 4 and 4 and create. Now we have the 3 partitions that are linked together. Partition 1, as we had said earlier, is for the boot partition. So we will select that, the free space. We'll go to add GPT partition. We leave the size alone. It'll use the max size that we had set earlier for that partition. And we'll change the mount point to boot, and then say create. Next, we go to the MD1, which is our swap. We go to the free space, add GPT partition, and we change the mount point to swap. The format to swap, sorry. We go to the last one, free space, add partition, and this will just mount at the root level, and we want to format it as ext4 and click create. Once we have those 3 partitions linked together and they're up at the top, we can then just go down and select done. Continue. Here, this is information. You can just enter whatever you want for your name. You can enter whatever you want for your server name. Pick a username. You'll need it to log in, so don't forget it. Same with the passwords. They just need to match, and make sure you don't forget. When it's all filled out, select done. At this screen of the Ubuntu Advantage token, just select done. We do need our open SSH server, so select that. Just leave the rest as default, say done. We don't want to install any packages here. We'll install the ones that we need after we get our server up and running, so I'll just select done. And then you will go through the install process. This does take some time, which I will fast forward through. It will, towards the end, up at the top of the screen, we'll see that it will say installation complete, but it's really not. Well, the installation is, but it's doing updates. So you want to wait until down at the bottom of the screen you have the option to reboot the system. You don't want to select, at one point here it's going to say cancel update and reboot. You don't want to do that. Wait until it's complete and then reboot the system. Here you'll see now it says reboot now, and then just go ahead and reboot. I'm getting this failed on mounting CD-ROM because I don't really have a CD-ROM, it's a VM. Now, as the system reboots here, we're going to get to a point where it's going to present the option to log in, and then we keep loading the system. So you can wait a little bit until the system's done loading. The cloud init takes a really long time during boot. And once we get that up, we'll disable it. Or you can just log in. I just logged in, even though it's not complete there. And here we are. We have our base server up and running. And we're ready to install our VMs with the various services that we want to use. The next video, there are some things that we will install on this physical server. Obviously, we have to install the KVM for the virtual machines. We'll install some monitoring tools. So watch the next video, and thanks for watching Learn Linux Networks.